Welcome to Candid Conversations, the podcast where we sit down with the thinkers and trailblazers redefining what's next for technology, business, and society. I'm Jennifer George, correspondent at Fast Company Middle East. In this episode, we're diving into the world of blockchain, not just as a technology, but as a movement that's transforming how people build trust, exchange value, and connect globally. Joining me is Rachel Conlan, Chief Marketing Officer at Binance, who's leading one of the world's most influential brands at the intersection of finance and innovation. With Binance Blockchain Week 2025 just around the corner, we'll explore how Binance is humanizing crypto, building communities that cross borders, and shaping the narrative around the future of decentralized finance. Hi, Rachel.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Lovely to be with you.
Great to see you again as well.
Lovely, lovely. How are we today?
Good. I'm very excited. I've actually just come from doing a final tour of the space of the Coca-Cola Arena for Binance Blockchain Week. So we are in that 1 month countdown now and very excited.
So high energies, I'm guessing.
High energy, lots of big decisions made this morning, lots of requests that my team now are trying to clamor to see how they deliver. But a lot of fun to see, yet another edition of Binance Blockchain Week coming to life.
I think yours is a very interesting story and one that I want to use as an anchor for today's conversation. So you've built brands across industries that connect with people emotionally. Now, that's not necessarily the easiest thing in tech and in blockchain and crypto by extension. So when it comes to something as complex as blockchain, how do you make that meaningful for the everyday person?
I've been really lucky over the course of my 20-year career to have worked in industries that sometimes can be complex or abstract to the end user. And for us, when it comes to blockchain technology, I think the key is to not focus on the technology, but moreover, focus on the impact of the technology and how it's improving your life as an individual and how it relates to you. And that's something that we take seriously in every touch point from a marketing perspective, that we deliver, whether it be an event, whether it be a digital ad campaign, an out-of-home campaign, is how we make it relatable to every type of potential user for Binance. And I think that's critical when it comes to technology. Sometimes we get lost in, you don't need to understand every line of code or, the back-end system or the infrastructure in terms of how it's delivered to you. What you need to really understand is, what is the value to me? Why should I use this product and how it's going to improve my life? And that's something that we try and weave that message, obviously at different levels of complexity into all of our communications, our product marketing, our events, the full gamut when it comes to our marketing approach.
It's very fascinating that you've mentioned you don't necessarily need to understand every line of code and, be in touch and have a finger on the pulse of every new update that's happening in crypto. But just to better understand, in traditional marketing, we often talk about brand trust and storytelling. But in crypto, where transparency and decentralization are core values, how does that trust building look different today?
I think the crypto space as it stands now has done a very good job to this point, but obviously based on the distrust that exists sometimes among newbies in the space, we have a lot that we need to do still. And trust isn't something that you can just ask for. It's something that you have to earn every day, and we really focus on 3 different areas, when it comes to building trust with our existing communities, because it's about retaining trust with that group, and then building trust with newbies or new entrants to the space. And those 3 pillars are education first. This is an area that is complex. It is a new space for many. It's a new way of doing finance. So there's a lot that we need to do when it comes to education, whether that be through basic intros and tutorials or events, or whether it be through Binance Academy, our masterclass, online. We had 43 million people that participated. It's a free for all, lots of really great content translated in 33 languages. But that's really what you need to provide in order to meet people where they are. I think the second pillar of building trust is transparency. Mm-hmm. And that's something, one of the reasons that I was drawn to join Binance was the transparency in terms of, how they operate. We have proof of reserves, which is, a monthly record that shows that, every asset that we hold on our platform is backed. Mm-hmm. And, I think that gives people the confidence. We're owning and we're helping people. We're holding on to people's most important assets, their financial assets. So we need to ensure that they have that trust in us. And I think the third area really is about simplification of communication. And, that goes back to how we storytell, how we bring Binance to life in a way that's tangible for people. One example of that recently is around Humans of Binance, which was a campaign that we introduced a couple of months ago. And it goes back to what we were speaking about at the beginning of this, which is around educating on why it's relevant for you. And that, tells the story of our users on how they entered into this space. Everything from one person entered into it as a means to be able to travel across Africa and, not have to pay big foreign exchange sums as they're traveling from country to country. Another person, entered in this space in India because he was trying to help his daughter afford flying lessons. And when you start speaking in those relatable terms to individuals, they start understanding that this isn't an area that is just created for sophisticated traders. There's use cases for me, whether it be remittances, from UAE to another country, or whether it be starting a small business and having to make transfers, quickly across borders. So, I think that's where storytelling is so critical to build that emotional connection and show that this space has something for everyone.
It's so fascinating that you've mentioned that it's really the human stories that empower crypto and the concept of blockchain as a whole. But again, it's much easier when you're working with a very diverse group to just pinpoint certain conversations, certain narratives, and highlight them, and then turn that into really impactful brand messaging. But I'm guessing communications within a team looks a little bit different. Now, in such a fast-moving industry, marketers often play the role of a translator of sorts. So they help to bridge the gap between the innovation itself and public understanding. Now, at Binance, I'd like to better understand, how do you build this alignment between your engineers, your product teams, and just your brand storytellers to ensure that everyone is essentially speaking the same language in their own flair?
I've been blown away. I've been lucky. I've worked with IBM. I've worked with traditional finance. I've worked with pharmaceutical previously. All were designing products based around, different and a vast number of different types of profile of users. But I've been blown away since joining Binance 3 years ago is, one of the values by which we live is user first. And that's a relentless obsession, whether you be in marketing, whether you be in engineering and tech, or whether you be in product. And I think that really comes from the top of the business. And, one person I would like to highlight is Yi. And Yi is, one of our co-founders and is the self-declared chief customer officer of Binance. And she's really the internal champion for making sure that when we hear from our users, and remember, we have so many forums from which we're engaging with our users. It might be through our customer service. It may be through our social media. We have over 25 million followers across our social platforms. We're one of the most followed, not just crypto brands, followed financial brands. Or whether it be at a meetup, or I was in Mumbai last week and met with some of our community and they were sharing some concerns and some localization that they need a product. And what we're able to do because of the flat structure that we have and because of the feedback loops and because of the way we align quickly as an organization, we're able to escalate that immediately within our leadership teams. We connect every evening, there's a daily call. We share that feedback regularly. And, as long as there's a strong business case, there is a true need, not just for one user, there needs to be some volume. We'll dive deeper into that and look at how we can bring that to life. And we've seen some really excellent examples, where we make, and through our website, users can also give us direct feedback, and we'll keep them updated on whether the feedback or the insight that they've shared is something that we can act on. And I think that user obsession, that relentless focus on how we can make ourselves better as a platform is why we're so lucky to have reached this point of 300 million. We're about to hit 300 million users, because they recognize that we are prioritizing their needs, over maybe what is the business's needs. And that is an area that I think really comes from the top, but also we ensure that we, no matter what level you are within the business, what title you have, what your background is, what your level of experience, that you have the opportunity to escalate or, really point out where there's a need, and we act on it. And that relentless focus is really what sets us apart as a business. It means we all work 24/7, 7 days a week, but it genuinely is, the speed at which we need to operate, in the world of digital assets.
Right. I think I want to pick up a little bit more on this excitement and all of this momentum, because it's very important that we discuss Binance Blockchain Week. Now, last year's BBW was a huge success with thousands of attendees, and it even landed a documentary on Amazon Prime. Now, how are you planning to elevate the experience this year and essentially make it more impactful?
So this is my third Binance Blockchain Week at Binance, and I'm very lucky to have an incredible team, both from a global and a local perspective, that brings this to life. But Binance Blockchain is one of 3,000 events that we do on an annual basis, and those are in-person events. We have about another 3,000 online events that we do through AMAs and through the like. But as our flagship event, it's one that really becomes that big milestone in the calendar year. And, I've referred to it like this before, but I like to see it as almost the WEF or the Davos of crypto, where, we bring together the brightest minds, the most established minds. We bring together regulators, policymakers, our community, the many influencers that have grown our business, to where it is. And it's really about diving into, not just what happened in the past, but what is potentially next in the near term and in the long term. This year, for me, when you think about a financial event, you don't usually think of something that's fun and entertaining. So for us, we try and create, really what we describe as a festival of crypto. So one that you're entertained, but you're also educated. And we break down the user experience based on the many different types of users that attend. Or there's those, my husband came along last year. He's quite new to the space. He's learned a lot of it through me, but he came to, educate himself on the foundations. On the flip side, we had some of, the biggest whale traders, as we term them globally, that attended to find out, is there any alpha on what's next? So I think that's what's extraordinary about the event. We had over 11,000 people join us at the Coca-Cola Arena last year, plus 1 million people that live streamed in.
Oh my God.
We're hoping to double that this year, and we're on track at the moment in terms of, ticket sales and attendees, as well as, interest in the market. And what's really wonderful is hosting it here in Dubai, which has embraced, Dubai and the UAE, that has embraced the world of digital assets and has really become, I think ground zero, like the base for us, means that we get to celebrate all different types of stakeholders that are coming in. And this year we've got some very exciting names that are joining us for the first time. They're having their UAE debut, which is something I'm very excited about.
I think I just want to maybe zero in a little bit more on the fact that you've thrown such a varied range of events year round. And the fact that this is kind of the pinnacle of the sport for you as a marketeer and for your team at Binance.
It's our Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's your Super Bowl, essentially. So I just want to understand, what are you doing this time in the sense to deepen your global experience? So how is it different for your in-person attendees, and how are you really amplifying that experience for everyone that's tuning in online?
So for us, we think about, as I mentioned before, we think about it through the lens of, we've got lots of different user journeys when it comes to this event. From the content is king. Yeah. When it comes to these events. Like, I go to these events to educate and leave with new knowledge I did not have before. And we're in the very privileged position that, as Binance and being one of the larger exchanges, that when we invite people to come, they tend to come. So, we have Michael Saylor joining for the first time ever. First time ever speaking in UAE. We have, obviously CZ will be returning to talk about Giggle Academy and Easy Labs and the BNB chain ecosystem that has blown up over the last year. We have, Lily, head of the Solana Foundation, who's coming, to talk about the developments in Solana. But we also, on top of the retail discussion, we've seen a huge interest from the institutional space in this year's event. So we're bringing together what I would describe for the first time ever, a lot of traditional finance players with the digital asset innovators who are coming together to really show how, this industry and digital asset space is helping modernize traditional finance. And I think that's going to be I can't share too much because I want people to come and experience it. Of course, yes. But I think there's going to be a lot of very interesting insights from, those types of individuals. We also may have a very interesting debate that will be happening, which hopefully I'll be able to share more about soon. But watch our social channels to see what happens there. But the goal really is to inform, is to educate, but moreover, surprise and delight. Right. We want people to be entertained, and through that entertainment to learn about what's coming and what's next in the space, both in the near term and in the medium to long term. So really lay those strong foundations. I will say one thing. Binance knows how to throw a good party. That's something I've said for the longest time, and I expect nothing less from December first week. But just to, again, understand a little bit more, I won't pry too much, but as you've mentioned, you have some really high-profile speakers coming down this time around, including Michael Saylor, who's making his UAE debut, and you have, of course, other industry leaders. Now, how do you decide which speakers to spotlight in your year-round marketing plans, and which ones to kind of keep as on-site surprises for your audiences? Oh, that's a really good question, actually. We do a lot of social listening and sentiment analysis based on who are the most talked about speakers, who are the most talked about talent, who do people want to hear from? What are the top topics? Really, I think what's come to life this year is, the Bitcoin narrative is stronger than ever. That's the gateway into this space. So having Michael Saylor, who is seen, the ultimate Bitcoin maxi, to share his perspective and insight on where 2026 may bring us is going to be fascinating. But then, we've seen altcoin narratives really grow over the last year. And by altcoin, for those listeners who may not understand, I mean the Solana, the BNB, Ethereum. We've seen some really fascinating developments over the last year around that space and really see them explode. So, through representatives from their teams, whether it be CC or Lily, who I mentioned already, we'll hear from them what's next and what's on their roadmap, which I'm certainly excited. I don't know everything, so I'm excited to hear from them. But we're powered by about 50 partners as well over the course of the 2 days. Right. And I, from Cello, to Circle, the stablecoin narrative is one that we're really seeing private institutions and governments. So we're going to have Jeremy Allaire that will be speaking there, someone who has had the most successful IPO, I think, in a decade, recently. So I think it's just in one room being able to access all of these different perspectives, hear from them firsthand what they see as next. It's, it just gives you a very comprehensive understanding of this space, whether, as I said earlier, you're a newbie or someone that's much deeper in. I think you'll take very different things.
A little bit earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that there's quite a lot for just the retail investor, but you're also seeing a lot of excitement and enthusiasm from the institutional side of things. So I just want to tap into regulation. And we all know that it generally has the tendency to evolve faster than public understanding. Now, how do you craft marketing messages that are compliant today, but flexible enough to adapt to tomorrow's changes in rules and regulations?
I want to make an important point here. We need to remember the finance system as we know it now took 100 years to build. And in less than a decade, we're building similar infrastructure for digital assets, for crypto, for our broader ecosystem. So look, the crypto space, as we're seeing with many emerging technologies now with AI, is moving faster than regulatory evolution and transformation is. But for us, as I've shared with you before in our discussions, we are committed to regulation. We think it is critical in order to ensure that we drive more widespread adoption and we get to that billion users, that we speak about as that. And that billion users really is a metaphor for when we've hit mainstream adoption globally. When 1 in 7 people globally will hold crypto or engage with crypto. That's what that 1 billion users is about. But for us, we take it very seriously. Many of my team, in marketing has come from regulated industries where not one piece of advertising, marketing, event collateral is able to leave the building unless it's had, compliance or legal's perspective on it. Because for us, and even in, we're very lucky in UAE where there's clear regulatory frameworks where we work closely, with VARA, with central bank on what we can and can't do. But in other markets, we're operating where there isn't a regulatory framework for crypto yet. So, we adopt best practices from those markets where there is regulation, and use that as our kind of boundaries within which we work. And, we think that's really important to ensure that we're growing this space safely and responsibly. And we're bringing users in and educating. It goes back to education, educating them on how to enter into the space, right, in a safe and secure way. We want people to have good experiences. We don't want people to come in, make a bad decision with an investment and then not want to enter into the space again. So for us, we take it really seriously. I've nearly 280 people now in the marketing team. All are educated, on a quarterly basis on developments and compliance. All work hand in hand. We're 280. Our compliance and law enforcement and legal team is 1,250 now.
Oh my!
So it's 4 to 1.
Yeah.
So we definitely are outnumbered, but we'll work very closely with those teams to make sure that we are communicating, marketing, engaging, and connecting with our users in a safe and responsible way. It's something that's very important to us.
Just to bring this conversation to a close, I really want to spotlight your mindset as a marketeer. And as the CMO at Binance, if you had to pick one metric, aside from attendance, that you'll look back at, say, 6 months from now and say to yourself, yes, we've achieved what we set out to do at Binance Blockchain Week 2025, what do you think that metric would be?
This is a great question because I throw out all of the traditional marketing, social, event metrics. And, for me, a measure of success is when I'm at a token, in April where I met you last year, or whether I'm in another event in, Ireland or Europe or America, is when someone shares with me, I connected with this person at your event and we're now doing this together. And right. I do think, that's what's amazing about Binance Blockchain Week is the collaboration and the connections and the meaningful business that happens around the periphery of it. Obviously we have 2 full packed days of content, but there's hundreds, if not thousands of meetings happening around it from the attendees that are there. And we've seen, over the last few years, I've seen amazing founders come and meet investors at this and start to launch businesses. And, they connect with me and reach out and share with me how things are evolving. That's a measure of success for us, is that we are bringing, not just education and entertainment, but we're bringing that real opportunity to create meaningful connections with individuals that are going to support the future growth of this industry. And that's something that I know myself and the broader leadership team, it's one of the reasons why we all have a lot of sleepless nights in the lead up to this, is to ensure that we are putting on that experience that facilitates that.
Lovely. I'm actually so glad that you've highlighted something that a lot of us don't think of. And the fact that, there is a lot of business impact that is created on the periphery and on the back of this one event in the year it's so true. And also it has multiple meanings, right? It means different things for different people. For me personally, I'm ecstatic. Could not be more excited to join you guys. But Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing this very thoughtful rundown of what it's like to throw an event at this scale, and also what it's like to be a very active and deliberate marketeer in today's fast-paced world of DeFi and crypto. And just to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to Candid Conversations for more episodes exploring the transformative power of technology and innovation. Until next time, stay curious.